Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another video as we work our way through this series on the greatest sermon ever preached by Jesus, also known as the Sermon on the Mount. I'm out here once again at a state park, a place that I love to go when I read the Bible, when I study Jesus. And guys, I got a new microphone, so hopefully the sound quality sounds a lot better. Before I was using a super cheap, like $20 Bluetooth microphone connected to my phone. I major upgraded. This should be much better quality. None of the crazy wind you heard in some of the other videos. For those of you who love audio as much as I do, you'll know the difference that makes. But without any further ado, I want to encourage you to grab your Bible. As usual, I'll be reading from the ESV, or the English Standard Version translation of the New Testament. But whatever translation you have, it will be fine. They all come from the same Greek text. It will all make sense. But let's just pick up where we left off. We're in Matthew chapter 5, and let's go through verses 27 through 30. And Jesus is going to talk about lust. So let's dive into it. Here's what he said. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Now, remember what we talked about in the previous video. Jesus is taking the 10 commandments and he's upping them up a notch. Now, the 10 commandments, just as a brief recap, when Moses went on Mount Sinai, he received the 10 commandments from God. And in many ways, from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is the greater Moses. He's going up on a mountain to give us a new law or a new way of living. This is what it looks like to be followers of Jesus. And he takes many of the 10 commandments. He doesn't change them, he doesn't adjust them, but he gets to the heart of the matter. So if you remember last week's video, we talked about you shall not murder, and Jesus said, but look, murder actually begins with hatred. So Jesus is not interested in simple behavior modification, but rather in heart transformation. So what he does is he takes the commandment and he goes to the heart issue that is behind the commandment in the first place. So that's what he's doing here. He said, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, right? We all know what that is. But I say to you, so he's going to up it up a notch, that everyone who looks at a woman or a man with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Wow. So by that definition, I mean, I don't know about you, but by that definition, I am guilty of adultery. I do know about you. You're a human being. You are guilty of adultery. And he goes on to say this really crazy thing. Verse 29, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. And Jesus right now is sounding like a crazy cult leader. We'll talk about what he's talking about. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. A few things I think Jesus wants to draw your attention to. Number one, sin is way more serious than you or I even realize. When we think of something like lust, just looking at another person with lustful intent, having that second glance at that person, we don't think it's that big of a deal. Matter of fact, we joke about it all the time. We laugh about it. Even when we have major political leaders talk about these things, we just say, well, that's just locker room talk. That's just how guys talk. Jesus disagrees. Right? Jesus says that that type of talk and that type of thinking, that type of lifestyle leads to, I mean, let me have him say it so I don't get canceled for saying it myself. He says, once again, it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. So sin is serious. Lust is serious. And I think it's John Owen. John Owen, I believe he was a Puritan, one of the more ancient theologians. He said this, either you will be killing sin or sin will be killing you. And to kill sin, we have to starve it. To kill sin, we must adopt a wartime lifestyle. One of the other books that I'm reading just in my personal devotional time is the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. Now, if you know Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And while he's there, the enemies of Israel want to stop them. And they actually threaten them with violence. And Nehemiah tells the people building, look, here's what you need to do. You need to build with one hand and in your other hand have a sword and always be watchful. Be watchful during the day, be watchful during night. It's this attitude of watchfulness and being alert. And that's what a wartime lifestyle is like. If you've ever been to war, which I'm sure many of you haven't, I personally have not, but when you're at war, when you're being shot at, you have a heightened sense of awareness of everything around you. You hear something break, a broken branch, you're immediately aware that, hey, the enemy might be close, the enemy might be coming after me, I need to be ready to fight. Well, that's the type of attitude Jesus wants us to bring into sin, and in particular, lust. I mean, let's just talk about pornography as a very real example of this. Statistically, I think most people, if not many, but I think most people, especially most men and a good majority of women, are addicted to pornography. Now, a lot of us just think, well, pornography, it's not a big deal. Everybody does it. Everybody looks at it. But when you study the science, one good resource, I think it's Fight the New Drug. I'm going off just memory, a totally non-religious resource, but it talks about how it rewires your brain and causes you to have really serious issues with intimacy, just going back to pornography. All of that stems from this lust that Jesus is talking about. So when he says you need to rip out your eye, he doesn't literally mean that, right? Do not go get like a kitchen fork after this video and pluck your eye out or cut off your hand. That's not what he's talking about. But what he is saying is you need to be absolutely serious about removing things in your life that cause you to sin. So for example, if it's pornography, maybe you need to like put a lock on your computer, have accountability software on your computer, not use your computer, cut off internet. Like that's what Jesus is talking about. Your right eye and your right hand are the most important parts of your body. And Jesus is saying, look, you cannot stop at any cost to get rid of sin in your life. Either you will be killing sin or sin will be killing you. So whether it's lust, whether it's greed, whatever it is, we're going to talk about a lot of these things in the Sermon on the Mount. But once again, what we need to recognize is this. Number one, sin is way more serious than we give it credit for, right? And it is so serious that you should be willing to give up basically anything that you can overcome that persistent sin, that addiction in your life in order to live this new way of life that Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. So hey, hope you found this short video helpful as we work through this, and I will see you in the next one.